Hello, everyone. Just wanted to let you know that we'll get started in a few minutes. Just want to give people an opportunity to join us. So just hang tight for a couple minutes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our monthly Volunteer Leaders webinar. This month, we'll be covering handling and communicating the unexpected. And the subtopic is tips to consider when the best laid plans do not go as expected. My name is Larry Powell. I'm the Director of Affinity Programs in the VCU Office of Alumni Relations. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a 1985 VCU alum. I have over 20 years of experience working in the Alumni Relations Office. And we thought this would be a timely subject for a webinar, given the current environment that we're dealing with. Hopefully you'll find this webinar to be informative. A lot of what we're going to cover in this webinar will be more common sense type of items, but sometimes in event planning, it's helpful to be reminded of these common sense tips. You may find one or two tips that you hadn't considered previously, and it may be helpful in your event planning. And if you don't mind, if we can wait until the end to answer any questions, that would be very helpful. So without further ado, we'll get started. So as you know, in event planning, everything we do is designed to create great alumni engagement opportunities. That's basically why we're here. That's the purpose of our chapters and our shared interests and affinity organizations. We're just looking for ways to engage our alumni as best as possible. But as you also know, sometimes stuff happens, things that are totally beyond our control. You know, blizzards, tornadoes, a virus, social circumstances. Things just happen that that are beyond our control, but at the same time, we need to be prepared to deal with. And so during this webinar, we will discuss things to consider during the decision-making process to reschedule or cancel an event. Tips and reminders to incorporate contingency planning when organizing alumni events. Effectively communicating event changes and hopefully to minimize any negative feedback that may come about as a result of any decisions that you make. And so Maya Angelou had a very interesting quote that I thought was appropriate for our webinar. Hoping for the best, prepared for the worst, and unsurprised by anything in between. And so the purpose of this webinar is to address that last part of the quote, being unsurprised by anything in between. And some of the circumstances that you may face that can affect your event would obviously be weather. That's going to be the big one. Social circumstances, as we know, with the current climate, that's a big consideration that we have to start to be prepared for. Health concerns, obviously with COVID, that's been a big deal. Attendance, no matter how well your event is planned, you can't guarantee you'll have the attendance that you're seeking. And speaker emergencies, sometimes you have an event with a speaker and something happens. Obviously event issues. Religious holidays is something that is often overlooked. Are you scheduling your event during a major holiday that may give a negative connotation to your event? And then civic events that may be happening, parades, marathons, things that may make it difficult for potential attendees to show up for your event. And for those of you who are sports fans, you'll get the reference. For those who aren't, in 2011, LeBron James had a major decision to make about whether he was going to leave Cleveland to play for the Miami Heat. And he had a big TV show on ESPN to announce the decision. And so that's the reference by using the photo of LeBron James. Obviously, your event decisions aren't going to be televised, but they may be almost as important to your constituency as LeBron James's decision in 2011. So that explains the reference on that slide. So we can get started with discussing weather. That is probably going to be the most common a situation that may affect your event, whether it's affecting attendance, affecting whether to proceed, and it's a pretty big deal, and it's something that you always have to be prepared for, particularly during the winter months when you're dealing with ice and snow and things of that nature. One of the things in working with the riding Rams, obviously all of our events are going to be outdoors. So, we spend a lot of time being prepared for the potential of for inclement weather. And one of the strategies that I've used is I always reference 3 different weather sites before making a decision about whether to proceed with one of our rides. The reason for that is, if you're familiar with any of our weather sites or online weather sites, forecasts can be dramatically different. I can recall times in which one site said it was 50% chance of rain, the other said 30% chance of rain, the other said 10% chance of rain. So it's like, who do you believe? So you try to come up with maybe a consensus. And a lot of times what we'll do is we'll make decisions based on the worst forecast. But we do reference several different weather sites to kind of get a sense of, or try to get some kind of consensus on what the weather forecast is going to be. And we also make a determination as to when we need to make a decision whether or not to proceed with the event or not. For our Riding Rams alumni bike ride, we usually think in terms of that Friday morning before the Saturday ride. And we try to make a decision about whether to proceed based on the forecast at that point. And also keep in mind that weather can affect your event at any time of year. In the summer, thunderstorms are very likely. In the winter, like I said, snowstorms and ice storms. But weather events can happen at any time of the year. Tornadoes, hurricanes. We even had an earthquake in Richmond many years ago. So it can happen. Um, but also keep in mind that the top priority when considering weather affecting your event is the safety of your guests. That has to be paramount. Um, that trumps anything else in making decisions about weather decisions regarding your event. Ultimately, it's your guest's decision whether or not to attend, but we want to be as responsible as possible. And like I said, their safety is the number one priority. And I also encourage everyone to consult with the alumni office when there's the potential for weather impacting your event. And, just get some feedback from us. We can be pretty helpful in making decisions. Obviously events is something that we do quite often. And so we can probably be very helpful in helping you make your decision. Also, a couple other things to consider. Don't allow your personal comfort with a weather situation to dictate decisions about events. As we know, there are some people who have no problem driving in the snow. There are some people who are very challenged driving in the snow. So just because you may be comfortable proceeding with an event, if an ice storm is imminent, don't allow that to be the sole determining factor in deciding how to proceed with your event. And always err on the side of caution. Guests, if you have an event, people are going to show up. It may only be one person, it may only be two people, but unless it's just totally impossible to get to your event, if there's bad weather and you proceed, there may be some people out there who are going to risk the conditions to show up anyway. I got a personal anecdote about that. Several years ago, VCU had a big basketball game against ODU. Obviously, big rivalry. It was televised on ESPN, huge event. And because it was on ESPN, there was zero chance that the game was going to be canceled. We had a big ice storm that day, and I had to make a decision whether to come to the event, come to the game or not. And because I had invested money in my season tickets, because it was a big game, I risked the elements to come out to the game. The Siegel Center was maybe half full. And, it was a great game. For the purpose of this webinar, I'm gonna say that VCU won, which we probably did. But in hindsight, if I had to do it over again, I probably wouldn't have gone to the game. The ice conditions were very hazardous, and the conditions after the game were even worse than before the game. I think I ended up driving maybe 15 miles an hour to get back home. And like I said, in hindsight, it wasn't worth it, but because the game proceeded, I made the decision to take the risk. And you have to ask yourself, do you want to put your constituents in that same situation where they may make the risk to come out? Particularly for events in which there was great anticipation, or if the registration fee was very substantial. There are people who will risk coming out to your event, so keep that in mind. And also try to avoid making weather-related decisions based on financial considerations. I know during challenging budget times, it may be a difficult decision to make to cancel an event and absorb a little bit of a financial loss. but a financial loss is definitely preferable to human risk. So please keep that in mind. And then, as I mentioned with the ODU example, the forecast at the end of your event is just as important as the forecast prior to your event. Sometimes we run into the situation where it looks like the forecast is going to hold up for the event to begin, but then you find that there's hazardous conditions that may be coming for your guests on their way home. And so keep that in mind as well. Getting to the event and leaving the event are just as important in making your decision. And also, just like I said, just using just common sense and consulting with the alumni office whenever possible with weather-related decisions. Remember also, weather is going to affect the attendance. So, if you have an event and you're expecting 50 people and there's bad weather, you may only get 7 or 8 people. Are the 7 or 8 people who show up going to enjoy the event with the drop off in attendance? Keep that in mind when making weather-related decisions. Social circumstances, something that we're all familiar with the current climate that we're all dealing with. Be considerate of the thoughts and feelings of your constituency when planning events and planning communications for the event. We recently had an example of this with the African American Alumni Council. We had a wine tasting event scheduled last month, and the email communication was scheduled to go out the week of the George Floyd situation, where protests were starting to surface, and a lot of emotions were running high at that point. And so we had to make a decision based on social circumstances. How would our alumni react to an email about a wine tasting during the climate of protests and police brutality? And it just didn't feel right, and it just didn't come across as a good thing to do. So what we ultimately did is we postponed the email blast. We rescheduled the event and held it later in the month. Our initial communication went out when things started to kind of cool down a little bit. And in hindsight, it ended up being the right thing to do. And we had a great event, didn't get any negative feedback from alumni saying that we're being insensitive, or how can we think about a wine tasting with the things that are going on in our society. And so just be mindful of that the things that are going on around you can have an impact on your event planning. And don't let your personal feelings affect event decisions. It's always good to solicit opinions from others, get a consensus of thoughts from various folks, including the alumni office, and more often than not, you're going to make the right decision. Obviously, with the COVID-19 situation, health concerns can definitely affect your event planning. Obviously, these things are more common sense. Stay in tune with alerts from the CDC. If there's a widespread health concern in your area, consider whether you'll be putting your guests at risk by proceeding with the event. And like I said previously, it's probably best to err on the side of caution and safety. And if there is a public health concern and you do decide to proceed with the event, It's always a good idea to go the extra step and take precautions to ensure the safety of your guests, which means the new normal moving forward is going to be making sure you have plenty of hand sanitizer at your events. It may even be a situation where you offer masks. It may not be mandatory to wear a mask, but you may have a guest who would feel more comfortable with one. So just kind of keep those things in mind moving forward with your event planning. Attendance. No matter how well you plan the event, you can't make people come. So, you may find yourself in a situation where you planned a great event and you looked at the attendance numbers and they're not quite where they need to be. So how do you mitigate that? First, make sure you monitor your attendance numbers frequently. Um, Definitely, you can kind of sense where the attendance numbers are going to fall based on maybe previous history with the event. One of the things, using the African American Alumni Council as another example, with our reunion weekend, um, our constituency has been notorious for registering for the event within like 2 weeks of the event date. So we know, based on past history, not to panic when the attendance numbers are a little bit lower than we would like for it to be, say 3-4 weeks out, because based on past history, we know that the numbers are going to spike as we get closer to the event. So if you have the opportunity to reference past history, definitely do that. But I also encourage you to always keep an eye on attendance, because there may be a window in which you can kind of adjust and do something different to address the attendance concerns. Also, determine ahead of time the minimum attendance figure that you need in order to make the event a successful event. You could plan for an event for 100 people, but if you know that, if you get at least 35 people, you can have a very enjoyable event. Make that determination on the front end. And, again, continue to monitor your attendance numbers. Work with alumni relations and alumni communications to assist with promoting your event, particularly if the numbers are a little bit lower than you would like, through social media and various other channels. We may have a number of opportunities to help spread the word to boost attendance and get the numbers where you want it to be. And then also, as I mentioned in the previous slide, consider how your guests will react to an event in which there are very few people expected to come, but you proceed anyway. Is the event going to be enjoyable if you only have a handful of people who are in attendance? And kind of feeding off that, take advantage of the DAR registration forms. Kind of makes it very easy to communicate with attendees if there are any event changes. We can also utilize social media to spread the word about any event changes. And also, one of the things that people tend to not think about is, can you pivot the event to accommodate smaller attendance numbers? If you initially planned for a social for 50 people and you only get 10 people registered, can you pivot the social reception into a dinner event and have a very successful event for a smaller number of people if you kind of repurpose the event? So kind of keep that in mind, and also incorporate that into your contingency planning when you're putting together your event. Can you pivot to a different format if the numbers aren't what you want it to be. Virtual options. During this pandemic, everybody's been doing more Zoom meetings, doing more virtual events. Think about incorporating a virtual element into your event so that if you do have, let's say, lower than expected attendance numbers, maybe you go virtual. Can you do that? Even if you have good numbers, do you also want to add a virtual component to your event to allow access to folks who can't come to your event in person? So in this age of new normal, virtual components are going to be more and more prevalent moving forward. So think about that in your event planning. Can you incorporate some type of virtual element to broaden the potential scope of who participates in your activities? Speaker emergencies. Sounds very basic, but sometimes it's something that we often overlook. Make sure you have the cell number of whoever it is that's on the agenda to give remarks, particularly if it's someone that is literally attracting most of the people to your event. Like I said, it's something that sometimes we don't think about until it's too late. The event's supposed to start in 15 minutes. The speaker's not there. Then you realize, hey, I have no way of contacting the speaker. I only have their office number. So incorporate that into your event planning. Make sure you have a cell number for any prominent guests or speakers who are vital to the success of your event. Also, is there a way that you can proceed with the event if the featured speaker has an emergency? Think that through. Is there someone that you can call on if your featured speaker is a no-show? Is there someone you can call and get them involved in your event at the last minute? And also understand that people understand that emergencies happen. And so, don't think that if something happens that's beyond your control, people will be disappointed, but then I think more often than not, people will understand and won't give you a lot of grief behind it. Venues. When you're exploring venues, think about venues that can be flexible. Can they make the adjustment if your numbers are smaller than expected? Will they allow you to get out of any contract or reservation if for whatever reason you need to either reschedule or cancel the event? If venue A is A+ of venue, but they have strict contracts that won't allow you any flexibility, and venue in the second venue may be an A- venue, but they provide you with more flexibility, then maybe you consider that when making your choice. Also, when organizing outdoor events, ask if there's an option to move it inside. That can be a very important component in terms of making decisions about venues. Other considerations. Zoom bombing. Hopefully you don't have a lot of experience with this, but it does happen. So when doing virtual events, try to come up with safeguards that will prevent your event from being disrupted by hackers or just people who want to be intrusive and ruin your event. Some of the things you can do is consider having a two-step process for people to participate in your event. Perhaps have a registration form and at some point closer to the date of the event, you send them the Zoom link. Consider using passwords. Just discuss discuss the feasibility of whether you really want to post your Zoom meeting link or your virtual event meeting link in a public forum that anyone would have access to. Just some things to think about during our new normal. Communications. Communications is very important, particularly when you're rescheduling or canceling an event. Like I said, I think most people tend to be very understanding, but the way you message event changes can be very important to how the updates are being received. I think it's important to be very transparent about event changes. Um, I don't think you gain anything by being deceitful as to why we need to change an event or why we're rescheduling an event. So, just be transparent and open, and I think you'll see that people will be very understanding about any type of updates to an event that you're planning. Also, be prepared that you may receive negative feedback. It only takes one person to to post some negative feedback or send you a bad email or send some type of communications that reflects that they're not happy about your decision. I mean, it happens, and usually it's more of an isolated situation. So, just deal with. We just have to kind of deal with it and deal with that one individual. But I think if you really are intentional about your communication message, you can mitigate a lot of possibility of negative feedback. Um, Also, something that people don't think about is the possibility that you make an event decision based on the weather forecast, and the weather situation doesn't happen. We deal with that a lot with bike events that it calls for 60% rain, and you find out that it never rained. So just understand that that's a possibility, and you may have to answer to that when people see that you canceled your event because of a weather issue that never happened. And also, like I said, with social issues, pay very close attention to the messaging and the language you use to make announcements regarding event changes or event updates due to social situations. One of the things we do with the Riding Rams is in our event announcement, we include information on where to get the latest updates regarding the event. So generally in our on our registration form, we'll have a line saying, if in case of inclement weather, go to our Facebook page or our website page, or go to the alumni calendar. And if there are any event changes, it will be posted there. So, we try to post the updates on multiple platforms, and we try to let our constituents know ahead of time where they can go for the latest updates on whether the bike ride is going to be whether we're going to proceed with the bike ride or not. And so that might be a good strategy to use with all events. Let people know where they can go for the latest event updates, and incorporate that into both your communication and your registration forms. And finally, a quote from Laurence Olivier: "Don't waste your time striving for perfection. Instead, strive for excellence." doing your best. And I added that quote because I think that's something we should just always have in the back of our minds. You know, we can't be perfect. We can just do the best we can. There are some things that just aren't going to be within our control. So, you know, as long as you do your best, as long as you prepare yourself, um, you can probably sleep well at night, you know, regardless of what happens, whether, you know, you have bad weather or bad attendance, you know, as long as you did what you can do to make your event successful, that's all we all can do. And so, questions. Feel free to post a question on the in the Facebook comment section, and Parks will relay them to me if you have any. Okay, so if there are no questions, I think we're good. So I just want to thank everyone for participating. You know, you guys have participated in my very first webinar. So you guys will always have a special place in my heart. And hopefully we'll do more of these in the future. So thanks again for coming, and everyone be safe.